All right, we're shifting gears today. I had a little bit more material in Unit 1, but we had spent so much time. It appears to me that we spent, 7 classes on the first unit, which is fine because I believe that that's very crucial to these next 2 parts is conquering the man before you conquer the work that you have to do. But we are going to move into the professional life today. If things go well, I'm a little ambitious. I want to try to deal with 3 particular sections in Unit 2, and also give you a review for your midterm that comes Thursday. Do not forget to bring your book, Man of God, to class. You will be toast for part 1 of your midterm without it, unless you have it all on your computer. And if so, then you probably have it memorized and you won't need the book anyway.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right, we're going to deal with a couple of things. The first thing I want to talk about this morning is the daily schedule. I have a packet of material that I'm going to hand out to you at the end of this particular section to look at some samples and to talk about some things. But most important and easiest way that I know to make the most of your time is to have a daily schedule. I want you to think of time as a resource, just like money. The unit's different. That's in hours and minutes and seconds instead of dollars and cents. And there's 168 instead of whatever you might have financially. But people will spend your time for you if you are unscheduled and disorganized. People are going to spend your resource. And by the way, as you're typing in your notes, this is introductory material. We'll get to the main points here in a moment. And may I suggest that if you are schedule-oriented, you're going to be more productive. If you're schedule-oriented, you're going to be more productive, and you're going to be more able to measure that productivity. I think that whether you have a schedule or not, you can go through a day and you can feel busy, but if you have no way to quantify that, you may have been spinning your wheels. I was watching a car this morning coming back from the gym, and a lot of energy was being expended, a lot of effort, but that guy wasn't going anywhere. He had his tires stuck and he was spinning them. That's a lot of people's time, or their schedule, or the way that they spend their time, is there's a lot of activity, a lot of motion, there's just not much getting done. All right, so let's talk about why you have a schedule. Why do you have a schedule? I'm going to deal with 3 reasons why I believe it's so important. The first one is very spiritual in nature. A daily schedule helps you with the stewardship of your time. You know, Paul mentions that concept of stewardship in 1 Corinthians 4, verse 2, that it's required of a steward that a man be found faithful. God has entrusted us with that time. You think about some who only live 20, 25 years. All of us have exceeded that. And in as much as we may get Solomon's estimation of average of 70 years, and if by reason of strength 80 years, or I should say Moses, Psalm chapter 90 and verse 10, we've got to make sure that we're using that time wisely, redeeming it, as Paul would say in Ephesians. Now, it's interesting to me that in Jeremiah 29 and verse 11, that God had a plan for the exiles. He says, I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29 and verse 11. Now, Jeremiah is saying, in context, you've got captivity in your future. And you're going to be stuck off in this land for 70 years, but I've got a plan for you. And as Israel or Judah at this point looks at themselves, they're looking at themselves as a people and their posterity and their future. May I suggest that even in your lifetime, through God's providence, because you're God's children, that God has a plan for you. If you yield yourself to Him, He'll open doors for you that are unique to you. And so as you're a steward of your time, the better you use that time, the better God can effect that plan through your life. You know, there's a very important statement made in 2 Timothy 4 and verse 5 that perhaps we can skip over. Paul says, among other things, that the work of an evangelist is to fulfill, notice, your ministry. Nariah's ministry is different from Chris's ministry. Charles's, Brad's, Scott's, your ministries are all unique, and mine is too. You can't fulfill my ministry. If you're a good manager of your time, you're not helping me, you're helping you in your ministry, the ministry that God has given you to do. And so a schedule is going to help you with the stewardship of your time. Second, as you can see there, good planning will help us to avoid anxiety. In the Sermon on the Mount, how does Jesus summarize the need for us to overcome anxiety? You know, he says, seek first the kingdom. Kingdom matters going to be first in your life. All these things, the things they worried about, the food, the clothing, and the shelter, the food and the clothing, rather, those are going to be given to them. How does he end that?
Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all else will be added unto you.
All right, what's verse 34 say?
Yeah, I don't know.
What about tomorrow?
Oh, don't worry about it.
Take care of itself.
It'll take care of itself. And so how do we help to take care of itself? We just say, all right, Lord, just whatever. I'm just an open book. I'm not doing any planning. Just hit me with tomorrow. Now, planning is certainly going to help us to overcome just this open-ended concern that we might have. Being proper stewards of our time will help us about anxiety. It keeps us from being like the man in Christ's story who wanted to build a tower, but he failed to do what?
Plan.
Right. What's the phrase we often talk about? He didn't count the cost. And so because he didn't estimate the cost, what was the end result?
He couldn't finish it, and he was a laughingstock.
There you go. Two things. He failed, and he was the object of ridicule. That's Luke chapter 12 and verse 48. It could have gone completely different if he had invested himself properly. But he didn't count the cost. The time came, he couldn't finish it, and everybody that came by and laughed at him. Others mocked him, I think the text says. And then number 3, a daily schedule gives you direction. Now, there's a balance here, isn't there? We talk about how God opens doors for us. And how you may have your day planned and your week planned, and things happen that completely throw that off. Somebody comes into your life, somebody comes into your office, somebody you meet at the grocery store, completely changes everything. Was in the Walgreens parking lot about a year and a half ago, and a lady is trying to park in that parking space. It was, I guess it was about 2 years ago. It was snowing, and so somebody left a cart there. Moved the cart out of the way. The lady parked the car, got out. She said she couldn't believe somebody do that, and asked if I was a Christian. I said, yes, I am. She said, well, I just don't see that anymore. And I can't, we started talking some, and next thing you know, we have a Bible study at the house across from the Walgreens with a house full of 8 people. Brett and I did that. Jonathan Cooper, if any of you were here when he was here, was involved in that study. I'd like to say that we converted them. We made better Catholics out of them. But it changed the course of a lot of things in the future just by moving the cart out of the way. So there's that end of it, and yet we've got a plan so that we have direction in our life. We need to keep in mind the need to pray about what we're going to be doing that day, that week. So we got to pray, and we need to let Him direct us and launch out in faith to do His will. So there's the one side. We need to say, God, please open the doors of opportunity. Seek His guidance through His providence, through His answer of prayer, in the things that we're going to do in our life. But a schedule balances that out by giving you a template of what you can expect to do that day. Now, for whatever reason, I don't have the other three items of as to why here, but I'll go a little slower if I need to. Number 4, it helps you prioritize your ministry, especially in the short term. What do I mean?
If you've got it planned out, you could see what we would call the 80-20, where you need to maybe put more of your focus and energies versus the nitnoid, less time consuming, etc.
All right, so let's kind of look at that in a very broad sense. What? And I like that breakdown. What goes in the 80? in a minister's life?
What is most urgent?
Getting the sermon ready,
Sermon,
Bible classes, home studies that you maybe have with unbelievers,
okay,
visits,
visitation,
Family.
correspondence to visitors. Say it again.
Family.
Family. Okay. For now, I'm just talking about what happens within the confines of work in the professional life. Family is a priority that has to precede that. All right, so we got the 80. What goes in the 20?
Cleaning the office.
Okay. You know, and now let me say this. Whatever we put in the 20, especially if it's something like cleaning the office, I find I just cleaned my office, but you guys could not tell it by looking at it. Doing those things helps to make the 80% more productive. If that office is disorganized, you don't know where anything is, it's going to impact sermon. It's going to impact Bible study. It may impact some of your personal interactions. All right, so we might say cleaning the office. What else might go in the 20?
I'm thinking the guy that just stops by to chew the fat.
Okay.
Edifying the people in the office.
Say it again.
If you have people in the office, you need to speak to them, talk to them, see how they're doing, how their life is going.
Okay. All right, so I don't know what's going to happen to you. We're going to get to staff probably either Thursday or after we get back. But you may be in a position like I am, and it's the first time in my preaching life, where in my contract I am I forget my title, but it's something like office manager. That means I am to manage. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean I go in there and I look over their shoulder and I keep a log of their time, but it does mean that they report to me if they have to be out and they're sick or whatever. By the way, a position I do not like, and I've told the elders that those are grown folks and they need to be able to be trusted, and they are, and our elders are very good about that. It's an inherited contract, but that is a function. You know, and it's important. The people are important. And all these things are important. The guy that comes to choose the fat, he's important. But it's your schedule we're talking about. And if you have a schedule, it helps you to prioritize. These are the things that must get done. Bulletin articles due on Thursday afternoon. I know that. And so that's got to be on the priority list. We've got folks in the hospital right now, and if I just lay that off there somewhere, it won't get done. Especially when Myrna's over there on the very east end of town on Aurora, and then Bob Finessi's up there, Second and Sims in that area, all over the place. And there's those kinds of situations. We've got a funeral to go and attend tomorrow, and we got a meeting this afternoon. So you have all those things, and you've got to say these things are important. But I've got 2 sermons to get prepared, and so those things. A schedule helps you to prioritize what goes where in the week.
Where you find time to keep your personal Bible studies, like denominational doctrines, to stay sharp on stuff like that? Where do you put that?
Well, that's 2 places. 5 a.m., which, I don't. They called me Pops in college because my roommate and I, we started going to bed at uncollege-like time, like 9:30 or 10 at night. Well, I started then getting up early in the morning, and it's been easier to do that as I transitioned into preaching. There's quiet. There's nobody up. Nobody's going to disturb me, so I have that time. But I can also take some time during the day. There's some lull times. Sometimes because I go to bed sometimes late, get up at 5, I get a little tired. Best thing for me to do is to break from the routine and go maybe stand at the shelf and study one of those things.
Right. It's just when the opportunities come that we're praying about, and if you're not sharp, you might miss it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so you got to carve it out, and we'll talk about that. I'll show you on the daily schedule and give you a template. Brad, did you have a question?
I did. Something I've been thinking about. I've heard you say it now several times. Scott just brought it back up. I was thinking of it last night again. And if this will be covered later, that's fine. I can hold my question because it's not that pressing. But I'm not getting, I'm personally not, it's not clicking why I can't kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have what I'm studying for the lesson and the Bible class be my own personal study as well, and combine the 2 as long as I step back, and say, how can I apply this and how will it make me better? Separate and apart from, I guess combine it all together, but make sure I do that for myself as well.
That's a great question, and I need to make a distinction. And what I have often said is that in my personal study, it bears the fruit of being material for my sermon and Bible class. There is a portion of that when I'm studying for Sunday. The more that I memorize, the more it becomes a part of me. The more I feel it, the more it is me. And if we don't feel what we preach, then it's an empty process. So I think there's a portion of that helps supplement who we are. What I'm saying is that there are some guys, the only personal study that they ever do is for Bible class and preaching. To me, that's inadequate.
That's why I don't get why not.
By itself. I have to, 2 Corinthians 13:5, I've got to examine myself.
Right.
And now, I can't just preach every single lesson based on what I'm struggling with and dealing with. Now, a lot of that will, but the elders will say, you need to preach on deacons this week. Well, what's the personal edification for me in that lesson? Or I need to preach on church discipline, and I'm walking in the light. All right, I understand that I need to stay faithful. Some lessons aren't going to have direct application. I may be talking about the struggles of being single. I have been single at one time. So not every lesson is going to have a personal application as much to me. What I'm suggesting is, if the entirety of what we do in our personal study is chained to or tied to what we're doing in the pulpit in the Bible class, I believe, and maybe it's just third opinions, but I believe that we will miss some very crucial needs we have in our own life. You know, I may not be preaching on anger management, but I may, in my own personal life, need to be looking at patience. I need to be looking at the tongue, those kinds of things. And so I'm going to study, in addition to what I'm studying for local work, and what I need in my personal spiritual life.
All right.
There's a daily need to be drilling deeper in praise and devotion and communion with God. And that may or may not tie into my sermon or Bible class. So it's certainly, I think that has to necessarily be in the realm of judgment. But a guy who is the depth of his study only relates to his local work, sets himself in a position, if he's not careful, not to take care of his own personal spiritual needs. Sometimes they track, sometimes they don't. All right. I'm glad you asked that, because I don't know that I had that anywhere else, and it may have been something you other guys were wondering about, but I think it's a good question. And that's how I would answer.
I only know because some of us, I'd be ready for a sermon, preaching a sermon, studying for a sermon, but then something else would come up. Somebody, like, my family always has some crazy questions. It's like, I don't know. I don't know nothing about that. I haven't been studying that. So.
Right. And that can be the fodder for your own personal study, something that you're confronted with. And it's going to happen many times in your life that somebody's going to ask you a question that you're going to have the wisdom to say, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out, and I'll let you know. And then that's going to drive you to the book to study. All right, number 5. Why do you have a daily schedule? It helps to prevent large blocks of wasted time. Well, what happens in those large blocks of wasted time? What are you doing if you're not doing things related to your local work?
Going backwards?
Well, that's true. I mean, that's the consequence of it. But I mean, in a specific sense, it could be web surfing, checking on your fantasy football team, or looking at that dream vacation destination, or I don't know what, catching up on the New York Post or the Fox News or whatever. Any number of things like that. Checking your Facebook, I know it's more maybe a girl thing, but, sometimes whatever it might be that's an equivalent to that for us.
I think what happens is that when we don't prioritize and making sure we tackle what is most important first. For instance, you may decide you don't want to check out some newspaper. When you go, they might see something very interesting, and that'll capture your attention and keep you there longer than you're supposed to.
That's right. I mean, see, we're not even talking about wandering in places that are immoral and aren't right to be. It may be perfectly legitimate in its own time, but its time is not when you're, so to speak, on the Lord's clock. Daydreaming, very easy for that to happen. Wandering around, just finding somebody to visit with, calling, texting. Any of those kinds of things can happen. Next thing you know, a day has gone by and you've gotten very little done. If you have a schedule, a to-do list, so to speak. It helps you to know, all right, I've accomplished this, because a lot of times, I tell you what, Monday is the killer. You come in on after the weekend, after Sunday, so you've got, first of all, you've had several days when you've not touched base. And then you also have a lot of stuff happens on Sunday, always does. You just look at this past week, a lot happens. A lot of visitors, a lot of folks to follow up with. But you come in there and you're pulled 15 different directions. People on the phone. I've got 2 elders that call me every week, and I know that that's going to be time. And so I multitask. That is the time where I'm on the phone and I'm trying to get some things done, and trying to intently listen. Sometimes that's hard. But you're doing that. You got letters to write. You've got for me, I got daily bread to do. I want to get started on. If you don't get started on that sermon, man, that weekend starts looming on you, and you hadn't gotten it done. So it keeps you from just having these large blocks of just something that you can't quantify. Number 6, seeing your plans gives you a sense of what you are emphasizing in local work. This may be as important as anything. One of the schedules I'm going to show you has a time quantifier on it. You know what I'm saying? I spend this much time doing this. I spend this much time doing this. I believe that's very significant. Because what you do with that is you smooth it out and you say, okay, where have I spent the majority of my time? Where am I lacking? Some guys are going to see the need to spend more time with their lessons. Some guys are going to see themselves very weighted in the book with very little people interaction. Again, the word always is balance. All right, so there's the apology, if you will, the reason, the defense of a daily schedule. Now what I want to do is give you some practical tips for a daily schedule. There's quite a few of these, so I'll give you a little time to get a head start on it. All right. Tip number 1 is write up a schedule at the beginning of the week. What I would recommend at the very first thing is to spend some time to reflect before you start putting the pen to the paper. Or, I mean, if you put it, I know these days you may already be putting stuff in the phone, or you may put it on the computer. But however you do that, I'm just so old school about some things, and that's one of them. I started preaching in 1992. I had one of those typewriter word processors, had the computer screen, you know. I didn't even have well, I can't remember what they called them, XT. If any of you guys remember that, 286, 386, 486, I didn't have any of that. I had that little, whatever it was, can't remember, word processor. And so everything was longhand, written out, typed up, or whatever, and put it in the file. So I still do that. But I like that. I mean, I put my groceries, I know some people put it on their phone. I put my grocery list on a piece of paper and mark it off as we go through. Do the same thing with my schedule in the week. But I spend some time first and reflect about it and think about the items that need to go on that list. It's a brainstorming thing that's peculiar to that week. You guys know who Doug McNary is. Does he come in and speak to you at leadership? All right, Doug and I go visiting frequently. And so I think about the kind of visits I do with Doug are different from the kind of visits I do with Brett or the kind of visits I do with the elders. They're a little more low impact with the people who are outside the core. They're people who just need encouragement. And so I sit down and I write down who it is we need to visit. Tonight we're doing those kinds of visits. But when I go with the elders, I know that's different kind of folks. When I go with Brett, it's typically those that are sick or the elderly, those kinds of things. With regard to writing up a schedule at the beginning of the week, feel free to add items as you think of them. You may have 10 on Monday, but on Wednesday afternoon you add 2 or 3 more. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if they come up. With regard to writing up that schedule, also realize that prioritization is ever changing. Your priorities are going to change all week long. Somebody dies. There's visitation. There's the funeral. You may be the one asked to do it. So whatever you're in the middle of has to be put on pause. Because even if you have a stack of sermons that you do for funerals, so I've found so often that you have to write a funeral sermon that's specific to that occasion. You have somebody you don't know, somebody who's a non-member, and you're just called by a family member or from the funeral home director. In Virginia, I had that happen now for Haran and McConaughey. I'm one of their contacts. If they have somebody that doesn't have a church home, then they call me and I go and do the funeral. That one I could pull out of a stack and adapt. But so often, especially if it's a member, it's very specific to them. And that takes time. We'll talk about funerals here in the next few classes. You get up a Bible study. Again, that changes your priority list. In regards to writing up a schedule at the beginning of the week, also organize tasks by day. I don't visit necessarily every day. I've done it different ways. Tuesday and Thursday are visitation days for me. So my Tuesdays and Thursdays look different than other days of the week. I have daily bread Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so that's on my list. It's not on there Tuesday and Friday. Also include appointments and tasks that you have volunteered to do or been volunteered to do. So it's good to be exhaustive. It's good to be a guy who writes stuff down or types stuff in or whatever it is. As soon as it hits you, you do that. All right, so that's the number one thing. Let me just give you a sample here while I'm here. Organizing tasks by day. Let me give you an idea of what that might look like. I didn't realize I had included this. All right, got about 7 things here. Number 1, write letters to visitors, members, etc. on Mondays. This is apart from your regular stuff. Write letters on Mondays. Number 2, visit on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is just a sample. It has worked well for me. You can adapt, but it gives you an idea of what I'm talking about. Second one is visit. And I put on my visit on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Depending on the size of your work, you could get up at 8 in the morning. There may be certain visits that you can make that early. And you can spend all day long making visits. And just take an entire day and then visit from 8 to 5, 8 to 6. That's how my brother-in-law does it. Does a good job with that. Number 3, file articles and sermons and correspondence on Tuesdays. And I understand as you guys start out, I don't know how much filing you're going to do. I mean, it may be that's time with the Evernote where you're scanning stuff into your computer and your backup drive because your computer hard drive can crash. You got to have it somewhere or you'll lose it. I lost 2 months of stuff, even though I have a time machine, because my hard drive crashed about a year ago. So somehow you need to have it somewhere where you can have it when you need it later. Number 4, schedule Bible studies for Mondays or Thursdays. You know, I'm sure Wayne Berger told you about that in personal evangelism when you're trying to get up a study. Instead of leaving it open-ended, we need to get together and study sometime. I have found this very effective to say, would you like to study the Bible with me? Sure. Well, what would work better for you, Monday or Thursday? Well, Monday I got the kids from babysitting late, so maybe Thursday would work better. Well, they might not they wouldn't have wanted to commit to either one. Or they might say, well, I'm not sure either one of those works, but Friday will work. Oh, okay, well, all right, I'll adjust. See, but I'm pinning them down. But if you can kind of have it in your mind that these are times that'll work, and why do you have to set them for that specifically? Maybe you have Monday night for the master, so Monday won't work. Maybe there's Tuesday night ladies' Bible class, and you have to watch the kids. So there are certain limitations in your schedule, family-wise, otherwise, that will keep you from that. Number 5, for me anyway, if you have elders meetings on Thursdays. Number 6, write articles on Wednesdays. And then Scott, number 7, do specialized studies on Wednesday. Premillennialism, baptism. Now that I don't think of as lightweight, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. That's more an hour and a half where I really drill down and I read perhaps a debate book on it. Or I look at a defining book. I may read Max King's book on the kingdom. He's 80-70 guy. and then write down there and see his arguments, and then try to answer them biblically.
I just try to stay up because I forget a lot of that stuff. It doesn't. I don't know about you. Your memory might be better, but there's a lot of details that I forget. What was that scripture?
Right.
I should know this.
And that's what does it, is blocks of time spent doing that. And time. I've been preaching, 21 years, and so I've had 21 years of weeks in which I spent time on days doing that kind of stuff.
And them hours add up.
They do. And that's how the mind works. All right, so that's the first thing, is write up a schedule at the beginning of your week. Now, do you notice something about that? These are those extra things. This isn't the standard Bible study and for Bible class and for sermons. These are the things that make a difference in whether you're productive or not in local work. Yes, sir.
Is Friday not in here because that's your day off?
Okay. I do not schedule things on my day off. And we'll talk about that when we get to the time.
You're one of those guys. Okay.
Well, and I'll tell you, and I am, and I recommend so highly that you are, whether it's Monday or Friday. And I'll tell you why. I'll even get to why it's Friday instead of Monday. And different guys have to do it different ways, but I'll explain why I do it that way. This past Friday, we had a fellowship activity that took 4 hours. And it was actually a fellowship activity that separated us from our boards. We've had Bible studies. We've had people into our homes. Sometimes there are stretches where Friday gets intruded upon. But as hard and fast as you can, you need to protect that time, because if you have, especially if you have children, and you have a marriage, you've got to protect that. What you want to do is you want to keep your family from resenting. I know. I come to this as a preacher's kid. I know and have known a lot of preacher's kids. Go to Christian college and you see them, and there are a lot of guys and girls who resent preaching because their dads never took time. Now, again, that's balance. Some guys have no problem with that. But I especially approach this class because you guys are of most of you. Now, Chris, you might not want to get lumped in, but in a general sense, in the same kind of generational thinking, that's not lazy and not prone to not be productive. You were raised at a time in which we were driven to be to work hard and provide and that sort of thing. And so we've got to remember not to neglect our families. Number 2, mark off the items as you complete them, so your schedule becomes a to-do list. Mark them off as you complete them. Man, there's some satisfaction in that. Being able to mark something off, especially if it's a tedious task. Well, and we'll talk about, I think, somewhere about delayed gratification. Yes, number 9 down there. And I think there's a method to the madness of how you attack your list. Number 3, be comprehensive with your schedule. I want to focus on 5 areas there. Comprehensiveness. In other words, if you look at your to-do list, your schedule, you're looking at it in terms of the local work. Remember that day that we wrote on the board, I think we were over there, all the different people that are in your congregation, people at different places of different parts of life, different variables that make up who they are. Well, they're who you minister to. Okay? So let's look at it in 5 ways. Number 1, first of all, you focus on your personal goals. I want to know X about whatever subject it is. I want to conquer what the Bible says about baptism. Every passage I want to be familiar with on the Greek level. I want to know how the words function. Or I want to exegete all those passages and have them conquered. Mark it in my Bible. Or I want to write a book on whatever, Philemon. And so I'm going to, that's not going to just write itself. I can tell you. You have got to schedule time. So those are the kinds of personal goals. Next, focus on subgroups, i.e. singles. A few years ago, I went had a single man in the congregation, Tim Smallwood. He and I would go visiting together every Tuesday afternoon. I did some things with the singles, but here was a guy just trying to mentor and to focus on. There's somebody in a subgroup in the congregation that devoted energy to. That takes time. And of course, you know how that goes. You make 3 visits. What are you doing? You're making 4 visits, aren't you? Because that single guy you're with, you're spending time with him, or whoever it is. A subgroup would include youth. What do you do with the youth? How are you focusing on them? Divorcees. The elderly. Johnson Kell taught our boys how to play tennis, I think, in 2007, 2008. That was amazing. I guess it was 2008 because he was already 90. And to have a guy like that, who, he's slow, but if he gets the ball, you're in trouble. Because he's got, probably 70-something years of experience playing tennis. And he knows what you're thinking. You don't even know you've thought it yet. And he's ready. And he'll kill a shot if he can get to it like nobody's business. But to have our boys with them, well, it grew from that, and everybody, we had groups we played with. We played Australian doubles. We played, straight doubles, and we played Australian singles. Just different stuff. We'd have a whole court down the street here, and it was, Daryl Dunnigan, Gerald Fulkerson, Carol Stevens, and Johnson, and different folks that come in there. And incidentally, we mixed some of those groups. Andy Thomas came down there. And so different ones, and Brett came down there. So we had all these different folks down there, but it was a great way, by and large, that were older folks, for to spend time to get to know, because you're not just playing tennis, you're not just talking smack, you're shooting the breeze with them and talking to them and finding out more about what is going on in their life. You got to spend time for that. All right, so you focus on subgroups and subgroup activities. Host youth events. Attend youth events. You have to coordinate something for one of these subgroups. Focus number 3 under that on congregational activities. Some of the stuff we've already talked about. You're going to have visiting in there. You're going to have counseling in there. Hospitality. Number 4. So we've got personal goals, subgroup activities, congregational activities. Now number 4, focus on brotherhood activities. What are you doing to try to impact the church beyond the local level? So, articles of publication. Work really hard on a particular subject. You guys will have been writing papers for 2 years. You're going to have a leg up on most guys. You get out there in your local work and submit an article to Gospel Advocate or to Gospel Journal or Rocky Mountain Christian. And you can benefit the church beyond your front door, beyond the local community. You do well in local work, and the elder comes and attends from the area, having a summer series. Maybe the preacher hears from a relative who attends that congregation of the good work you're doing, and he says, well, we'd like to come speak on our summer series. And so you focus on encouraging that congregation. Or maybe you have an elder coming through, and that happens. Comes through, and he's visiting the assembly that morning. You're just preaching a run-of-the-mill, regular sermon, and he goes, we sure love you to come and speak in a seminar for us, or to speak on a gospel meeting. So they invite you. And so you can impact the brotherhood as well. Or maybe you have those come up and you're working on that in your week. I'm speaking at Freed Hardman during our break week, so I'm working on that right now. That's in my daily schedule to get that lesson ready. Number 5, focus on community activities. What am I doing to impact the community? Proactive benevolence. Evangelism. So what I'm saying is, think outside the box, think as broadly as you can about what you're trying to accomplish in your local work. That will make you more productive. You can't do it all, but if you're thinking in all these directions, you'll get more done than the guy who just sits there and lets life happen to him. Number 4, construct the schedule keeping in mind regular, recurring tasks. And that's going to look different for each one of us. For me, that's daily bread. Chapel. I go to chapel 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. If the schedule allows, more. I have lectureship prep. I've been working, I've probably done 4 or 5 hours this week of preparing for our lectureship, the Bear Valley lectures. Did the future preacher training camp preparation. And so what I'm saying is, your local work is going to have particular items that are unique to you, that are aside from those other things. Expectations. The elders may want to meet you for coffee, 8:30 every Wednesday morning. You may meet with the deacons once a month. A men's breakfast. Any number of things. Number 5, have a way to measure how much time is spent on the items on your schedule. I don't know what that is. I'll give you some ideas of how I do it when I give you the samples here in a minute. But have some way to measure. How much time did I spend preparing my sermon today? Or how much time did I spend in that personal prophet Bible study? Or how much time did I spend in visitation today or this week? Number 6. Use your schedule to keep you balanced in how you use your time. Number 7, be in the habit of writing it down or typing it in, whatever it is. When an idea or a task or a need arises in local work, don't wait, don't hesitate, record it. Well, I'll tell you where this really, really impacts you. Sundays, Wednesdays. When members see you, or a phone call that you come in and it's on your machine, somebody's left a message, and it's something they need your help with, or that the reminding that you're supposed to do, or asking you to do. Could you go and see my mom? She's not a Christian. She'll be off work on Wednesday. All right, and if you don't put that down, what's going to happen is Thursday's going to come, and that member's going to say, I'm not sure what happened. That's right. Don't do that. Because what does that do? What does that do to your ministry?
Kills your street credit.
Yeah, there goes your credibility. Because they can't trust you. They can't depend on you. And you weren't trying to undermine them. You weren't trying to be ugly with them. You just forgot to write it down. Number 8, don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't put 57 items on that list. You aren't going to do it. There's no way in the world. You can be miles wide and inches deep that way. We can frustrate ourselves through overambition and actually accomplish less. So know your limitations and your capabilities and schedule accordingly. Most of us can't knock out 15 things a day and do them well for sure. Number 9, consider tackling the most dreaded item or items first. That's that delayed gratification. Eat your vegetables and then you can have dessert. Do your homework and then you can get on Facebook or play video games, whatever. That's what we say as a parent, but what about ourselves?
That's what we used to do to hanging drywall. Guys, see that lid? It's 20 foot high. We got to do that first.
That's right. Get that done, and then.
Can't we just see that easy 8-foot room up there?
That's right. And those take more time. They're more grueling. They're more difficult. But you get that out of the way first, and it's not looming. It's not waiting.
Well, and then by the time Friday comes, you're in the grave. So.
That's right. That's right. They even get off early.
Yeah.
And it works the same way. And ministry. Not quite as painful or. All right, number 10. Adjust your schedule to allow for your most and least productive times. I don't know what that is for you. It differs. I know what it is for me. My most productive time is in the a.m. Especially about 8 a.m. to noon. Man, I am grooving. And you know, that's why that 2 Timothy chapter 2 comes to my mind, because here comes that well-meaning or not person into my life right there wanting to use that time. And they want an hour of it. And that's when I start singing, "Be with me, Lord. I can't live without you." Because I won't handle that well if I'm not careful. That's my groove time. But things come up.
Is there a way that you're focused and then somebody comes into your office? Is there a way that you can get refocused faster? Have you found anything like that?
These things, it's like those demons, the disciples couldn't cast out. Fasting and prayer, I don't know. Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier. But remember, if God's controlling your life, those things work out. If I have a sermon, I'm thinking, man, I'm rocking and rolling, and somebody comes in and interrupts that, it gets done.
Yeah,
it's amazing how, as B.A. Baracus or whoever, well, no, it's Hannibal said, love it how a plan comes together. Yeah. It comes together. It happens. Either easy or difficult. Right. But, sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, well, I'm just, sometimes you're just like, man, yeah, I got all this down.
And that's when they come in.
Right, yeah.
9 times out of 10.
That's what my son calls it.
Yeah, exactly. But you got to handle that. Now, I'm less productive in the mid-afternoon. 2, 3 o'clock, I got to unplug. That's when I get in my car. That's when I head off and do those visits. So you know what your time is. There's some guys, I don't even understand it, but there's some people who say 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. is my groove time. Okay? I can't relate, but I believe you if that's what you say. And so that's when they do their best work. They probably don't do their best work from 8 to 10. They're just coming alive at that point. Number 11, focus on one thing at a time. If we're not careful, we'll have 3 or 4 projects open. And if we're doing 3 or 4 things at once, when we get to the end of the day, we may find out we did less than if we had just focused on one thing at a time and knocked them out. In regards to this is probably the best time to just remind you to take a break when you become unproductive. Let's say you say, I'm going to spend 3 hours this afternoon working on my Bible class. Well, along about 70, 80 minutes in, you're just fried. Get up and go to the water fountain. Go to the bathroom. Go just walk around. Go out, take a lap around the building. Get some fresh air. Come back in and get to it. Just a few minutes away. It's kind of sharpening the axe, Spend more time doing that and chopping down the tree. You can recharge your batteries and be more efficient when you get back to it. Number 12, if you use an organizer, find a means and a method. That's easy. I don't know if you're a daytimer, book user. If so, find a system and stick with it. Find some means, if it's a computer or a book, that helps you do that. I have it in different places. I have it on my computer. I have one of those monthly calendars, that sit on your desk, and I make use of that. And I also use index cards. I write it down on an index card. And that's my to-do list that I mark off. Okay. I would say that's the most efficient way. You probably can find a much more efficient way to do it. All right, finally, follow Jesus' 5 keys to the use of his time. Jesus, being the perfect man, was the perfect time organizer. And it's really interesting to see how the New Testament reveals that. Number 1 was direction. That was the first key to Jesus' success. Jesus could use his time to the greatest advantage because he knew why he was here. What does he say in John 4:34? My food
is to do the Father's work.
Is to do the will of my Father, to finish his work. Okay? Now, you'd think that's a duh, that's a given. Sometimes we can lose a grasp of our direction, what we're here. What are we in local work for? To be the office administrator? To answer the phone? To handle the complaints? Now, I'm not talking about what members think might be our task. But not careful, that's what we become. Jesus knew why he was here. Number 2 was prayer. Jesus knew the power of prayer. Did you know we have a record of 17 instances Jesus prayed in the Gospels? That's just what's recorded. And his life is recorded with such brevity that you can't miss how the Holy Spirit is stressing that through the inspired writers, that Jesus prayed. Once he woke before daybreak, he often went to a solitary place to pray. Probably not going to do your best praying with the TV blaring in the background. Now, I'm not saying that you can't get in some prayer time when you're in traffic or when, even in a crowded room, because you can. But you have to drill down. Jesus is a great example. He went away so he could focus. Another time he prayed all night. Through all of this, we're seeing an emphasis on Jesus emphasizing prayer. And I believe that will help us with the use of our time. And that is an important use of our time. Number 3, single-mindedness. Jesus was compassionate and was responsive to people's needs. But he did not allow himself to be swayed by guilt or swayed by demands. You don't find Jesus fretting over what he didn't get done. Now, an example of that, you remember we were talking about, I think that's Mark chapter 6, where Jesus tells the disciples, let us come apart and pray. And the people were pressing him and wanting him to heal all their diseases and sicknesses and to cast out the evil spirits. And so we find Jesus going and doing that. The next day they come after him again, and they want him to do the same. Does he say, okay, let's do it some more? No, what does he say? Let's go on to the next village to preach. For such I have come to this earth. Well, Jesus, here's people who need you. They need you to tend to their physical needs. He's done it, hasn't he? He spent the time. But now he's saying, I understand you got folks that are hurting and needy, but I have another task. It's on my schedule. I've got to go and do this. And he didn't look back and say, well, I sure wish I'd spent some more time doing it. Now, if we're not ministering to others, we ought to feel guilty. But Jesus is an example of one who didn't let the needs and demands of others dictate his schedule. He knew what he needed to get done. He was single-minded. Number 4, individual attention. Jesus is a role model for how to deal with somebody one-on-one.
What was it called?
Individual attention. Paying attention to the individual. Think about the woman at the well. Jesus goes at a strategic time to that strategic place, and the disciples come looking for him, and there he is, focused on that woman. And as a result of that, an entire Samaritan village believes in him. What about Nicodemus? It says a ruler came to Jesus by night. I wonder how that happens. He was at a place where he was accessible, and Nicodemus knew where he could find him. How about Peter? Jesus spent time focusing on Peter. Saul of Tarsus, he gave individual time post-resurrection. The woman caught in adultery, after those others go away, he focuses on her. Zacchaeus, he goes to his house. I mean, so you can just go through the Gospels and see all these individuals and study how Jesus focuses in on them and spends his time with them and invests in them. And so we're looking at the keys, Jesus' keys to the use of time. Direction, prayer, single-mindedness, and individual attention, and then hard work. Just pull out one day, in one day of Jesus' ministry. And this is early on in the book of Mark. It's actually in all the synoptic Gospels. He taught in the synagogue, cast out a demon. Oh, I know we can't do that, but we can help somebody who's hurt. He went home with Peter and healed his mother-in-law. Again, we can make the visit. and then healed and cast out demons from a crowd who gathered once the news spread about Peter's mother-in-law. Taught in the synagogue, cast out a demon, went home with Peter, healed his mother-in-law, and then healed and cast out several demons from a crowd. There is great satisfaction in being able to look over a day and to have found yourself being productive. To say, I know how I used my time today. I was able to do this, and the other. Reflect on what you've done that day. It helps to gauge how you're doing in time productivity. And remember the words of Jesus in John 9 and verse 4. We must work the works of him who sent me as long as this day, for a night is coming when no man can work. As it comes to the perspective of our lives, where we have vitality, we have health, we have relative youth, we've got to use our time wisely because night is coming when no man can work. Now what I'm going to do now before we leave this is to look at the samples. So I'm going to hand out these particular, this big stack of material, and I want us to go through it. I'm going to look at it, everything but the, let me see if I can find out what I got here for you. Okay, that's all yours right there. We're going to look at everything but the last 3 sheets, so this will take a little time. And I won't insult your intelligence, but I will belabor a few things here. Now, Brett's may look very similar to this, but here's one way in which I keep up with my time during the week. You see, it's called our weekly progress report. I want you to see what kinds of things I put on that. This is what I'm trying to do in a particular week. All right, so what I will do, let me see if I have, let me look through here and see if I think I have one filled out. Go to the 3rd sheet down. What this is just a blank. And this is something I turn in to the elders. All right, so
Every week?
Every 2 weeks, because we don't meet every week. But I'll have 2 that I'll turn in. You notice here, this is one week.
Yeah.
All right, so and this is just for me, so that I can go, what am I doing? All right, so Elnora Hell, Carolyn Roberts, I went and visited them. They're the sick and the shut-ins. And then I had a member in the hospital, so I went and visited him. And then we had an evangelistic visit, and I went and visited a lady with her 3 children. All right, and here's something I think is very important, because you can feel like you've lost some time if you don't properly quantify it. And what I call this is member-based touching, and what means I did so. Email, phone, and Facebook. All right, and so, or as you can see in that first item, an actual visit. All right, so I'm doing a follow-up Bible study with Chris Works, and I did it that Wednesday. During a teenage fellowship, had those folks over to the house and visited with them. Had some folks over to our house on Tuesday. Had a teenager over one evening with the boys. Email correspondence. I want you to look how many people you can, if you keep up with it, that you talk to. And you just go through it. The diversity of that is unbelievable. Phone conversations. How many people are you on the phone with? All right, then weddings and funerals attended. If not attending, what hindrance there is. So I might not be able to attend the funeral. I'm out of town. So I'm going to write such and such funeral was held. Didn't attend it because I was in Texas or whatever it is. Programs and initiatives. I pulled one out of I'm sorry I pulled you one from 2011. I thought some of this sounded a little dated. I'll bring you a more updated one if you want. Bible studies or benevolence. And then what sermon I was writing, you can see how it goes there. And then I also write out what articles I write. And so you can just see, that's kind of how it works. It's pretty self-explanatory. But let's kind of show you what belongs there. Now, I do it a different way. I like this way better, but I do it this way. Remember I said you can quantify how much time you're spending? Look at that one that's right there. I haven't done it this way in a couple of years. But on a given day, how did I spend my time in this day? All right, so I do those things and I quantify them. So, for example, on Monday of that day, Monday's this way. There's a lot of administrative stuff to do. So I spent some time in correspondence, writing letters to our visitors and answering emails from members. Personal study. There's an issue that's come up in the last few years. Can you pray to Jesus? So I did some study on that. Read some of Wayne Jackson's material. I read something from a fellow in Mississippi who had a different view. Sermon preparation, phone conversation, visits, pop-ins, all those kinds of things. I make sure I write them down. Now, something that Brett does is he plans out a year. Here's a different way to look at it. What do I want to get done in this year? So that's the teen events. All right, so you can see what all he has planned there. Youth rallies that are vital, various parties. This helps him to balance out how much of this is play stuff, how much of this is service-oriented, and how much of this is spiritual. And so by planning it out, there's latitude. Things come up and change. Now, here's what he does now. He said, I got away from doing it the yearly way. He said, there's profit to that. But now I've replaced that with monthly events. And what does that do? What does that do for parents? And this is a schedule that's for him, but he gives it to teens and their parents. So what are we doing as a youth group? Well, here it is. What are we doing service-oriented? Well, look on there. You know, look at November. It's a raking day. All right, so that's just the same. Something I turn into the elders every year is my speaking schedule for the year. This has to do with my time away. Not vacation time, but time spent. That has changed through the years. All right, so if you just want to shuffle all those to the back, we'll handle these next three after we get through the end of time management. Any questions about daily schedule? All right, well, let's start dealing with time management. I want to start out and introduce what I think is a very important matter. And that's this. We must remember that there are three parts to the day. All right, so what are the three parts of the day? Every day. Morning, afternoon, evening. Every day has it. I think it's very important, as often as possible, do not work in all three parts of the day. Why? Goes right back to what Nariah was saying. My life is not just what I do in ministry. I need to reserve at least one part of that day for personal and for family. It's not always possible, but if I'll remember this as often as possible, again, it'll contribute to a healthy attitude of my family toward ministry. Now, that may seem cut and dry. We might look at this in the traditional sense that I go in the morning and I do my personal study. In the afternoon, I go out and make visits. In the evening, I'm home with my family. Guys, you already know it doesn't work that way, always. Sometimes it does. But Bible studies, when do they occur typically? Evening. Folks who work a job, when do you get to visit them? In the evening. Maybe, after they get off of work. All right, so how are you going to adjust that? Are you going to go ahead and do sermon prep and then stuff in the afternoon and then go make those visits in the evening? I mean, this is probably going to take, especially if you have to do any kind of driving, whether you're rural or urban, it's still going to probably take some time. What are you going to do? You're going to take some time in the afternoon. You're going to be home with your family from like 2 to 6, 2 to 6:30, and then you're going to go out in the evening. Or let's say that you were involved in a counseling or an intervention situation, or something came up where somebody wanted to be baptized, and it was 11:30 at night. When all is said and done, after you visited with them, whatever it is, you come strolling in at about midnight, 12:30. You're going to get up and go to work at 7? Well, you might, but if you don't, see, you adjust. And what you do is you make yourself a healthier person, and you have a healthier home situation. And it may sound like a duh, but a lot of folks don't do it. And so we've got to make sure that we don't work in all three parts of the day. Jim Lohr, Loehr, and Tony Schwartz have a very novel and interesting way to go about this. It's a book I would recommend. It's a little different. It's called The Power of Full Engagement. Their premise is that we need to work on energy management as much as time management. And that's where their focus is.
Work engagement.
Energy management. More than time management. And here's how they introduce their book. They say, we live in digital time. Our rhythms are rushed, rapid fire, and relentless. Our days are carved up into bits and bytes. We celebrate breadth this way rather than depth. Quick reaction more than considered reflection. We skim across the surface, alighting for brief moments at dozens of destinations, but rarely remaining for long at any one destination. We race through our lives without pausing to consider who we really want to be or where we really want to go. We're wired up, but we're melting down. Does that sound like our culture? Is there any reason, is there any wonder that we can't engage in deductive reasoning? That we can't have argumentation or thought? You're trying to teach somebody, and people are not settling in any one place. It's the product of the how quick. Watch a television show. How quick. Notice how often they change camera angles. The lighting changes. The depth. They're in. They're out. They're from this place to that place, and it's constant. And we have ordered ourselves in that same way that we're always doing that. We're flitting from here to there, and we're not settling anywhere. And as a result of that, we're not very productive. So their premise is that we need to focus our energy on our tasks and be more concerned about that as we are with the time management standpoint. And they continue by saying this. We walk around with day planners and to-do lists, Palm Pilots and Blackberries, instant pages and pop-up reminders on our computers, all designed to help us manage our time better. We take pride in our ability to multitask, and we wear out willingness to put in long hours as a badge of honor. The term 24/7 describes a world in which work never ends. We use words like obsessed, crazed, and overwhelmed, that not to describe insanity, but instead to characterize our everyday lives. Feeling forever starved for time, we assume that we have no choice but to cram as much as possible into every day. But managing time efficiently is no guarantee that we will bring sufficient energy to what it is we're doing. Now, I am not trying to offset everything I've said so far this morning. What they emphasize, I think that's very important, is that along with time management, we need to make sure that we engage in energy management. So what they suggest is you devote yourself, give full energy to something for a period of time. Then you step away from that. You recharge, and then you get into the next activity. And so we live at a time in an environment where the balance needs to be between time and energy and time and productivity. We truly need to make the most of our time. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 16. We need to make the most of our opportunity. Colossians 4 verse 5. And there's a limit to the amount of time that we're given to live in the flesh on this earth. 1 Peter 1:17. 1 Peter 4 and verse 2. And so we need to see time as one of those precious resources that must be spent as wisely as possible. I want to share another quote with you. This comes from Larry Ward, who is the managing editor of Vision magazine. And I don't know if I mentioned this in chapel or not, but he had come back from attending his mom's funeral. She had died suddenly of a stroke. And he was leafing through his mail, and he had lots of sympathy cards and notes. But he also had a birthday card from his mother, who had sent that to him just a day or two before she had died. He scanned the card, as you might think, for its contents, because this was so important. It's the last correspondence from his mom. And as he did, he saw on the back the last words she ever wrote to him. I must make the time count this week. Ward said this. He said, I carry those words on that little card with me everywhere I go. And over, I thank God for one priceless gift that He gives. What is this gift? That priceless gift of time. Each day, he says, we receive a fresh new supply, 24 hours, 1,440 minutes, 86,400 seconds. 24 hours we have never lived before. 24 hours we shall never live again. And so the point is that you and I must make the time count for the Lord, for the local church, and for our home. Now what I want to do is to give you some preliminary ways to make the time count at work. And here they are, about 5 of them. This is to make your time count at work. First was a little bit redundant, but write down your daily, weekly, and monthly tasks. And use that as a checklist, marking them off as you accomplish them. Nursing home, that may only be once a month. Men's breakfast, that's once a month. But it's time. For several years, I've done a television program. That's not something you do every day. I mean, you can, but usually that was something where you would go and you would spend an entire day filming several episodes. Incidentally, I'd like you guys, if you can think of it, to pray about a potential opportunity we have. We've been, it's been made available to us, the 30 minutes before the In Search of the Lord's Way TV program on Channel 3 on our local cable, that time slot's available. That would give the Lord's Church an hour in the Denver market. By the way, I don't know if you've seen this, they've done the most Bible revering cities in the U.S. It's in the top 98. Guess where Denver is?
150?
Well, especially coming from the South, you might think that. 71 out of 98.
See, not that bad.
Yeah, well, the Northeast dominates the bottom. The Southeast dominates the top. But if we're number 71, that means that we need, now how would we approach that? How about, and look at the resources we have. We've got Denny, How You Got the Bible. Christian Evidences, Bob and Denny and others have done that kind of material. Some textual studies. And so there's a lot of us that can bring those kinds of things to bear and to have that television program. So I'd like to pray that we can find the funds to do it and that we will be able to pull that off and do that. That's just has nothing to do with anything. It just came on.
It's important.
It is. I mean, just think about what we could do. And in this area, we've got to start with there is God. We've got to start with the Bible is His Word. And we've got the guns to prove that, to show that to the open-minded people in our society.
It's even different up here than it is from down south where I come from.
Oh, yeah.
There's
South
a lot
Colorado.
more farmer communities. People believe in God.
That's right.
Right, a lot of denominations, but you don't have to prove God as much.
It looks a lot more, because that's really rural versus urban.
Yeah.
It looks a lot more like other parts of the country that are more rooted in belief in that. That's right. Number 2, when you're made aware of phone messages, correspondences, or important visits, do them immediately without delay, if possible. Guys, I don't know. I think we all have preferences. I much prefer face-to-face. I hate's a strong word, but I strongly dislike phone conversations. I don't know. I would rather, to me it's incomplete. It's better than email, but email's easier. But somebody said the other day, you can't hear, I think it was in the exegesis class, you can't hear voice inflection, you can't hear tone, you don't know what people mean sometimes, you can misinterpret that, but it's easier. So you can hit it, you can be done, back and forth, and keep going. I don't know what it is about the phone. I don't know why I don't like it. I can't tell you, but I don't. I'd rather, but so if somebody leaves me a phone message, you know what I want to do? Stick that way over yonder in my to-do list. But time management says, go ahead and make it. Get it out of the way. You're done with it.
Or you can just throw it away, and if it's really important, they'll call back.
Forget about it, yeah. But then again, You're going, okay, I think I can screen that one, I'll just let it go. So, you know, it's kind of delayed gratification again. Just go ahead and take care of it. Correspondence, go ahead.
Can email your compassion and love.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I can tell you where we kind of are sometimes. We're in a hurry. Don't want to take the time. Number 3, don't touch the same piece of paper twice. That's just I have found that to be a very efficient time management tool.
You expound upon that?
Yeah.
Sure. And that's a principle, really. It may not be paper. It may be a virtual piece of paper. You're asked to do something, or you're given something that's task-oriented. And however it comes into your gravity, it hits you. All right? What do you do with that? Say, well, I'll just come back to that. Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're involved in something else. But when something, I don't know how to hit your desk, let me see if I can think of there are 100 different things that it might be. It might be that phone call I was just talking about. Or it might be, I need you to answer this. I did Bible questions for the Firm Foundation for a few years. And a question would hit my inbox. All right. Instead of nibbling at that, what I would do is I would take it, I would answer it, and then I could lay it aside instead of having to come back to it 3 or 4 times. Now, if it was, I didn't have the benefit of Denny's wisdom and the baptism of the dead and the pronouns and all that. It took me a little longer to get to the same conclusion and to go through all that. Well, I stuck with it, even though it was difficult to get done with it, so I didn't have to come back. So if I spent 30 minutes with that, didn't finish it, went on to something else, had to come back to it, far less efficient than if I just stuck with it. So I don't know if I've given you some good examples of that, but things that are tasks that befall us that we might delay, lay aside, inbox, outbox, lay it there in the inbox, and then have to come back to it. It may be a visit. It may be an email that needs answering. It may be an unpleasant exchange.
So just get it done and move on.
Yeah. And the idea is, and it's the touching the paper twice principle. It's having to revisit it because you start to do the task and you don't finish it. I don't know if that's
right. Starting and stopping always takes time.
Yep. That's exactly right. Number 4, develop and stick to a daily routine and schedule as much as possible, allowing regular time frames for recurring tasks. And then number 5 is pretty self-explanatory. Get into work as early as you can and leave at a reasonable rather than a late hour. And guys, I understand some folks are night owls and some folks are, early to bed, early to rise folks. The only thing I would say to keep in mind, because you have greater flexibility with your time, and occasionally there's an eldership or a men's business meeting or a structure that sits on you and keeps an eye on when you come in and when you go. But usually it's not that way. So you have to be a self-starter and determine that yourself. But one thing that drives me to be an early to rise, early to bed kind of a person is that most of the people in the congregation follow that kind of a schedule. And it can build resentment. If you are a guy who feels like, well, I'm most productive from 10 at night till 3 in the morning, and so I'll start stumbling out of bed at 10:30 in the morning. You may be very productive, but you might also build resentment among members who don't have that luxury. It may work well. I know a guy right now, preaches in a state west of here, who that's exactly how he is. But people understand. He gets stuff done, and it works.
State west of here, I like that.
Yeah, well, there's not that many, are there? I guess there are several. All right, so that's how to make the time count at work. All right, let's talk about making the time count at home a little bit. And I know this is a bit of a redundancy. But I just want to make sure that I have emphasized that enough. To take your days off and to take your vacations. And don't neglect this. I'll expound on that a little bit more. I said I would tell you why Friday instead of Monday. I don't know. I don't know if there are other days that preachers like to take. Here's why I have chosen Friday. Well, and see, some of this is very individual, but some of it's not. When I first started preaching, I took Monday off. All right, here's what I perceive as a disadvantage to that. You come in on Tuesday, I mean, you're that much closer to Sunday, and you haven't done anything, really, to prepare for Bible class and for preaching. If you're teaching on Wednesday night, that gives you a day and a half to prepare for that. And then, you know, not to mention that you need to be getting to work on your sermons. And so I just felt like I was always behind by taking off on Monday. But we did that particularly before we had kids. We have chosen to homeschool, and we basically follow, and we're under an umbrella in Colorado. If any of you guys are doing that, you have to fulfill a certain number of days. But the way our schedule runs is we can do a 4-day school week. Some public schools do the same thing, especially some charter schools. And so we do Monday through Thursday. So Friday is kind of like a Saturday for us because, guys, it happened here as it happened in Virginia that the elders approached me and said, because you have family at home, we want you to take 2 days off. So they say Friday and Saturday. All right, now, let's think about this logically. Is Saturday a day off?
No way.
Well, you know, it's a blue jeans and T-shirt day.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, from the standpoint of visitation, but from the standpoint of sermon preparation. I don't know about you, but I can't let an entire Saturday go by not thinking about and investing and plugging into my sermon. I'd be in a panic to think, the day before I preach, I haven't even looked at my material. I'm going to get up on Sunday morning and then try to get up there and preach with any kind of familiarity with my notes.
That's the first thing I think about on Saturday morning.
So it's not an office day, per se, but it's going to be bound up into Saturday. I can't remember the last Saturday I had that was fully off. In fact, I can't, in my preaching life, I can't. But it's more relaxed. So I appreciate when elders have done that. But Friday is the day where it's just completely, as much as I can, as often as I can, just devoted on, you know, that's the time to go and get our groceries. That's the time that we focus on things like bills. And that's the time that we may do some fun activity and those kinds of things. And so putting it into the week, I've had the entire week to work, and it works with our family schedule better. Now, that's certainly just opinion, it's expediency, it's judgment. But find out where that is in your week and take it.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense because taking Monday off kind of messes you up. You're right there. If Monday you can already start on your sermon, you already have your some research done, you already have your outline done. That's a big advantage.
Yeah.
For me, I'm always scrambling to get stuff done because you got school and then you got your sermon too. You want to put a decent amount of time into it.
Well, when you get into local work and you don't have some of the daily deadlines that you're facing, you'll have bigger picture stuff that's peculiar to the place where you are and working, and you'll still be knocking those things out. And you'll need, and again, it's the principle of you spend a little time away, step away from the work. It's good for you, not to be complete. And I think it's good that when you do that you unplug. That we live in a day now. You have your phone all the time. So you can get text, and there was a time, I was one of those preachers I resisted that had the pagers, and I'm glad that came and went, but I knew preachers that had pagers, and it's like, I mean, you could put shackles on somebody, and it'd be about the same thing. And so I was glad not to have a situation like that. You have to be able to be away sometimes. That's what you're talking about, screening the phone, cutting off the phone, or whatever you have to do, putting it in silence and ignoring it. Yes, sir?
No, how much vacation have you taken at one time? I know some congregations, they will not allow their preacher to take more than 1 week at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 1 week, spread it during the year or whatever it is, but they will not allow them to take more than 1 week.
I have never personally taken more than 7 consecutive days away from local work. I don't think it's wrong. I'm drawing on my experience, so I don't know what that's like. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But again, those are the kind of factors that you have to, that play in, is what will the local work, what is my arrangement with an eldership? Especially if you're talking about 2 Sundays. I don't hardly know of a preacher who has the luxury in local work to be able to say to their elder, because I have guys come and help me at FBTC, and that's not even vacation time, that's just time away, to say 2 Sundays. When I go on a mission trip, I'll be going 2 weeks, because it doesn't make sense to use the Lord's money just to go for 6 days, especially going any length away. But I'll do that where I leave Monday morning, first thing, or Sunday afternoon, and I'll come back Saturday night of the next week. And I'm going to stretch it as much as I can, but not miss 2 Sundays. By the way, if you go across the world and you have jet lag, you guys know this from jet lag, the next day you're pretty good in the morning. You know, it's that second full day back where it's rough. So I have every time I've been on a foreign mission trip, I've come back and I preach the next day. Vacation, a different story. I think it's good if you can. I've just, the way my schedule has fallen out, I never have done that. So I don't know. I'm sorry if I didn't answer your question. We'll talk about contract and that kind of thing, interviewing, where you deal with that. Let's say you've been preaching for 10 years. And you guys may be at a bit of a disadvantage, but what I would say, in that you've had careers or you've spent parts of careers in another line of work, you can say, I realize that I'm new to this job here, but I'm not a kid. I have been in the workforce for some time. And so would we consider the fairness of, instead of 1 week, 2, or if 2, I don't know when I started getting 3 weeks of vacation. I've never had more than 3. But when I came here, for example, I was new here, but I had been preaching for 15 years. And so I could say, or 14 years, even though I'm new here, I've got 14 years in on the job. So we started where I was in the last place. And that's a good starting point. If a church is asking you to leave where you are to come somewhere else, then you say, here's what I have in this regard. It's the first work where you have to establish some of that. And it grows a lot of times. They'll say after 2 years, we'll double your vacation. Okay, and it works that way. Number 2, make sure that you unplug with them as often as possible with your kids and your family. Watch a movie. Do things that your kids like to do. Fish with them. Play. See, I got boys, so I don't know. I mean, you have to adapt that for girls. Play ball with them. Might be going to shop with them or whatever else. I don't know. Date your mate. I have I know you think it's pathetic to make it a New Year's resolution, but I have it as a New Year's resolution to have a date at least once a month with my wife. You might think, well, that's not even nearly enough, but I don't know. If you can do 12 dates with just your mate in a year, you're probably doing better than a lot of folks. Number 3, take your children with you on foreign mission trips or speaking engagements and make it special for them. Same with your spouse. And guys, you may not have any interest in foreign mission work. It has become a passion of mine. I mean, being at Bear Valley certainly has helped that, but it preceded that even. It's one of the things I do, I think, that helps me as a local preacher, to be able to go, especially to a third world country where there are plenty of evangelistic opportunities. You get practice, you get to sharpen your sword. I mean, you can have 15 studies in 2 weeks overseas. Most guys in local work don't get to do that many in a year. And so you come back with your own fire, your practice, your study. You'll study with a Catholic one day, you'll study with a Pentecostal the next day, and then a Muslim, and then you're all over the board. And you come back and you have the competence of experience and a practice so anyway, but what I was going to say is take your children with you. Each one of my boys have been to Tanzania with me. The older 2 have been with me in Cambodia, and the youngest one, if the Lord wills and provides the opportunity, is going to go with me this fall. And it's formative to how they see the church, how they see themselves as servants in the kingdom. And so, you make those things special, and they look back and they say, I remember when I went with Dad to this or that. Oh, man, it makes a big difference. Yes, sir.
I think things like trips like that, it help you to appreciate what you have.
That's right.
When you go to those countries and see how persons do so much with little, it helps you to appreciate what you have.
That's it. And when you take your children with you, that tells them that you're important, that they're important to you. And it helps them to form feelings about preaching that are positive. You know, it's cool to be a preacher's kid because I get to go with my dad on a mission trip. I get to go with my dad to go speak or to go, do a vacation Bible school with the youth group somewhere. John Wynne, in a book called Pastoral Ministry to Family. It's a good book. I'd recommend it. John Wynne. He's got spitbones out. His denomination. It's called Pastoral Ministry to Family. He makes this very powerful statement. He says, if a minister devotes all of his time and energy to making a success of his profession, life in his home must suffer. It is possible for him to gain a church and lose a home. Incidentally, Brother Winkler used to say to us, Matthew 16:26, he would adapt that. And what shall a man be profited if he gain the whole world and lose his own family? I believe that's right. Anyway, Wynne continues, his sense of values need constant prayerful review, lest he subjugate family welfare to administrivia, I like that term, under the mistaken assumption that these, that is, administrivia, comprise the kingdom of God. So it really gives us a good tongue lashing about not neglecting our families and making sure that we don't subjugate family to the ministry. And so we've got to make the time count at home as well. All right, I want to at least start the material from Michael Davis. First of all, any questions about time management at work or at home? Okay? All right. Now, Davis contributed this to the Toastmaster a few years ago. And his approach was to explore some usurpers of time, things that undermine our time management. I thought this was very interesting. What are some of the things that keep us from being good time managers, in other words? Number one, looking for things. How much time do you think the average person spends every day looking for things? Researchers have done studies on this. Consistent number shows up.
Those that are unfortunate to not have OCD probably spend 2 hours a day looking for stuff.
That's exactly it.
Unfortunate not to have
2
it.
hours a day. 14 hours a week, and you can extrapolate it on out. That is incredible. Now, I can tell you something. One thing I have not done, and occasionally it really hurts me, is I started when I was first starting in preaching. I had a beautiful file system. I had my sermons color-coded and arranged by topic. And I have an entire drawer in my office that's devoted, and it has my first 3.5 years of sermon beautiful. Man, I can find it just like that. You know where the other 18 are? I got these big bucket files sitting on the other side, and I just stick them in there. Now, I have learned to write down the date that I preached it. But every once in a while, I want to supplement a sermon that I'm needing to preach right now with something I know I've done in the past. Well, a smart guy would have continued that system, but now, if I want to find something I've done on church discipline, I take out that big bucket file, and I thumb through it until I find it. And then, you know how long it takes? There's 2 hours right there. And then I finally think, oh, man, I must have thrown that away. All right, then I've spent 2 hours. But there's a lot of stuff we spend time looking for that is a chewer up of time. Number two, and I don't know, that's the pros and cons of OCD. That might make a good article sometime. That's a pro right there for sure. Number two, perfectionism. It's a time usurper. Know the difference between perfection and excellence. And it may not be anybody in this room, but you've known somebody who they can't leave it until it's perfect. And I've known 1 or 2 graphic art designers that are that way. They just nail and hammer and just all over that thing, and they just agonize for days and days until they finally get that one thing right. And that's not going to work very well if we take that approach to everything we do.
Repeat the statement again. Know the difference between
Perfection and excellence. We want to do a first-rate job.
So how do you do that? Like, your bulletin article.
Well, okay, good. For example, the bulletin article. Don't spend, don't, spend all this time agonizing over, you want subject-verb agreement. You want to improve in that area. So what I might do is on the side is I'm working on how to construct sentences so that they don't end with a preposition. I'm working on being consistent with my pronouns throughout. But I'm not going to sit there for 90 minutes, examining and looking over that, going, I can say it better this way, and you rewrite it again. Oh no, and then it's the difference in degree. It's just not just sitting there going, it's not good enough. Throw it out, start over again. And spend all this time, and then it's just, it's close, but it's just not good enough. You've wasted time. So it's a difference of degree. Enhancing your skill level without just obsessing on it.
Let me suggest for you, Grammarly.com. Because it'll find those prepositions in the pronoun agreements and
I like that. What is that?
Grammarly.com.
It's pretty good.
Does it really?
I mean, it's, you
Is
buy
that what
your,
you guys are using on your bulletin articles?
I do.
Oh.
Is it on mine?
I haven't started.
It's maybe
It's next
pricey
month.
for some people for a year
much?
subscription. It was either 115 or 130.
For a year.
You can submit as many papers as you want, as many times as you want. So I'll do one paper 10 times. I'll run it through that filter.
Oh, wow. I are not that motivated.
It'll find that.
But I want to spend that kind of money. I'm not OCD. I'm a cheapskate. No, I think that's good. So I think I would spend that, especially if and that might help you as long as it doesn't become a crutch. I mean, I know Grammarly wants you to be enabled and not be able to do it on your own. But for it may be a good investment. $115, $130 a year, and what will that do for productivity and professionalism? Because you're not wanting to be above the people, but you're going to have in every congregation those for whom they cannot hear your content because they're stuck on your grammar. Now, they need to grow past that, but they're there. And if the other person is still edified, who's not, who can't tell you, a gerund from an adverbial clause, that's fine. Do that. So I like that. So I'm going to try to remember that and look into it.
I was just tired of blood, sweat, and tears between me and Gretchen, and Denny would still find stuff. So thank you, Nariah, for suggesting that.
Grammarly.com. All right. Well, there you go. That may help with the perfectionism thing too.
You don't need to buy a subscription. You could just on the site copy and paste your document in there. It will show you, but you would have to kind of take note of where the problem is and fix it.
Okay. So it would catch the really bad stuff in the free side?
It'll catch it for you.
Okay. All right. I like that. Somebody have a pen because I want to write it down.
I'll email it.
All right, email it to
Right
me.
now.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. A third time usurper is a sloppy first effort. That's the opposite of perfectionism. Poor work is seldom satisfactory. You think I'm going to devote a solid 2.5 minutes to this church bulletin article. So just throw it through there. A popular adage is this: if you don't have time to do it well, when will you have time to do it over? If you don't have time to do it well, when will you have time to do it over? I think I made myself tend toward the OCD side, so I don't really, some of these, you'll say, I can't sympathize with that. I don't have a problem with that. Which probably means it's number 2 that you struggle with.
I wish I didn't have a problem.
It just depends on what's going on that week. I might just try to throw something out there. That means it'll work well.
I don't know why I spend so much time going through the sermon and making the words perfect, because when I preach them, I sometimes I remember the words.
It's a basis.
But sometimes most of the time it's just, in my head.
Yep. And that's where you got to find that balance.
Yeah.
And something that you'll find as you're going through that process is that something we all go through in the homiletical process is thinking that everybody, you don't even know that you're thinking this, but the subconscious thought that everybody can see what's in your notes.
Yeah.
And so if you don't execute it like you have it in your notes, it's like, oh, I've messed up. Well, no, they don't even know. This is your construct to help you flow through this. And they don't know that. And I don't know how long. It took me years before I got past that.
It's
barrier.
always, I didn't do it right.
I didn't do it like I had it down. Yeah. But, so really is the bottom line.
That's true.
All right, number 4, not understanding assignments. Especially if we're given tasks by others or are dealing with the expectations of or requests of others. Somebody has a program idea and they want you to vet it for them and to look it over, and you don't really understand the concept behind it. Right? We just, to give you an example, this great program that we just unveiled, we haven't said much overtly about it, but Tony Rayburn, the Kindness Servant program. When that first came to my attention, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the end game. I didn't understand how it was structured. And so I did spend a few minutes spinning my wheels, and finally I called Tony up and I said, hey, can we get together and meet? Can you explain it to me? And I saved a lot of time because there were things I had to do. A sermon I preached a couple of weeks ago about us being united and being a family was to help to roll out the kindness program. And it was another facet of the same thing. I had to say, all right, I don't know exactly, because he said, can you preach a sermon to help to kick this off? Well, and then we batted back and forth some of what he wanted in there. And before I started getting bogged down and trying to figure it out, I called him up again. Fortunately, I was going to deliver Gary's car at school, and so I was in Kansas. So I had all the time in the world, and Tony's self-employed, and so we had an hour and a half long conversation where we talked about what he had in mind. And it helped me I would have spent hours and hours trying to figure that out. Pride goes before a fall, and that's a lot of times what keeps us from asking for clarification. Maybe it's something that the elders expected. Maybe something big. Maybe something that had to do with your job description. But not only does pride go before a fall, it also wastes time. So if you don't understand, don't be too proud to say, I don't understand. All right, we'll finish this list after chapel. I don't know we'll see you upstairs. We'll finish this up. I'm going to get into the church library. I'll just watch time, and I'll make sure that what I may do is, after we finish this, I may go over the review for Thursday's test, and then we'll see what that time is. All right.
Number 5 is assuming others' responsibilities. And that's doing work that others are responsible for. I want to distinguish here that helping people is never a waste of time. But allowing ourselves to be used is. Don't we all want to be kind and approachable? I mean, we should. But we don't ever want to put ourselves in a position to where we allow ourselves to be taken advantage of. That's where the healthy ability to be able to say no comes in handy. There are others who will let you do their works. There are deacons that would let you do their work, if you will. It's going to take your time. You spend your time doing somebody else's task. Maybe it's the secretary. It's another minister. It can be someone who takes it. It could be your spouse. I'm not shoring up and helping out, but someone who expects you to do their work too. Number 6, not consolidating tasks. And this is that whole balance between energy management and time management. I do think there are times when we can kill 2 birds with one stone without diminishing that. Going to the grocery store. You know, we lived in our first work. We lived 35 miles from a major town. So we had a little tiny grocery store or two where we were. But the main hospital was that 35 miles away. So when we go and make a hospital visit, you know what we do? We hit the grocery store on the way back. Nothing wrong with that.
Makes good sense.
Yeah, you're going to be 40, 35 minutes away from there, and it helps you be more efficient with time. Go to the bank on the way to a Bible study. So, you just think of the ways that you can add together things that need to get done. Number 7. Another time usurper is anything that does not advance us toward our goals.
Rest and recharge is good until we reach the point that we're no longer productive. And our brain functions start to slow down. And so Davis would say that these are 7 time usurpers. And I believe if we can focus on these and avoid letting these predominate us, then we'll be more productive with our time. All right, I want to deal with about, I don't know if they're all on here or not, but about 19 things called practical tips during the day. Practical tips during the day. You may have heard the poem. What time is it? Time to do well. Time to live better. Give up that grudge. Answer that letter. Speak the kind word to sweeten sorrow. Do that deed you would leave till tomorrow. Every day is just loaded with opportunities. All right, so here they are. Some practical tips during the day. Number 1, do not procrastinate. Get to work immediately on the items on your list. Again, don't have to go to ESPN.com and check out all the scores. If you want to do that, get up an hour earlier. Take care of it. Don't do it at the office. Or don't do it when you sit down to study or however you have your day arranged. Number 2, set deadlines. This kind of goes back to perfectionism. What time should you finish task A? How long should it take? And the more you do it, the more you'll have a good idea about that. Number 3, don't waste your time in idle daydreaming sessions. Number 4, expect the unexpected. The better you are at being productive with your time, the better you're able to handle those drop-ins, those unexpected things that happen to your schedule, the things that can just really stress you otherwise. And when you set your schedule, be flexible. Leave yourself a margin for change and error. Number 5, again, learn to say no. It's a mark of spiritual maturity. That's all you know how to say, though. You've probably overshot the gap there a little bit. Number 6, use shortcuts. Shortcuts and helps. It's not ironclad, but there are occasions where don't go if you can call. And don't call if you can email. I'm not saying that's how you always handle a certain person, but there are situations where that's what will work. Number 7, as we've already said, work on one thing at a time. And do it well. Number 8, now this is something we tell our children, but it's something that has to characterize us as well. It's be a finisher. Wasn't it Solomon that said in Ecclesiastes 7 verse 8, better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, the day of one's death and the day of one's birth. We're trying to finish the race itself well, but we need to be a finisher of what we start. You start a project. Let's say you have a theme for the year, and you're gearing everything toward that. In January to June, you know it's been going pretty well, and then the wheels just start falling off. And by September, people are going, did we have a theme this year? You know, wasn't there a congregational emphasis? And you've just kind of dropped off. You've stopped the emphasis of that. Be a finisher. If you have a sermon series, we're going to preach 13 lessons from Revelation. You get up here and tell the congregation. You get three sermons in, you go, well, this is too hard. I want to focus on something else. Well, what does the congregation think? Again, street cred, I think was the word Brad used. You sacrifice that if you don't finish. And people observe that. So we need to be a finisher. Number 9, use prayer and willpower on a daily basis. Stay focused and on target. Well, I tell you, both of those are important. Prayer is God's power. And willpower is what you've got to put in. Number 10, watch unscheduled interruptions. And we'll talk about that again. We're going to get to it, how to handle it. But the more you fail to gauge and to monitor these, they mushroom. They grow somehow. Number 11, get started now. Don't keep putting it off. There are certain things you're going to want to just keep putting off. It may be visiting. Maybe visiting a certain person or dealing with a certain confrontation that needs to take place. But it could be just the mundane and the ordinary that we just don't want to do. My dad says he'd rather take a beating than write a church bulletin article. You might find yourself a kindred spirit. But he does that early on. And he realized that that's the way he had to tackle that, or he would not do it. Number 12, evaluate constantly. What is the best use of my time right now? It's a different answer today than it was yesterday. It'll be different tomorrow. Number 13, be selective. You can't do everything. Number 14, again, do the hard things first. Delayed gratification. I don't know what that is for you. I love getting in the Word. I love working on my sermon. I never have to get pushed into that. I don't know what that is for you, but whatever it is, tackle that early. Number 15, don't rely on crises or pressures to motivate you. It'd be kind of fun to do a survey in the student body and find out who's the last minute person and who's the, tackle it right out of class and go and get it done. I think it's probably more the latter than the former, especially for upperclassmen if you made it this far, unless you just really work well when you're doing that Walensa thing there on the high wire. I was really proud. I didn't know, because, again, we schooled our boys at home. I had no idea how it was going to go. And I don't know how it's going to be with the other two, but Gary puts me to shame. We never talk about what I did in college versus what he did. Because that boy will take his stuff right out of class and go to his room or the library and will do it immediately. That was the anti-Neal. I would pile it up and I would try to get it done at the end. And I learned that, certainly learned that in local work, that won't do. Number 16, don't constantly respond to the desires of others. Notice key words there, constantly. Do we respond to the desires of others? Yes. You also have to make sure that you understand the goals that you have for effective ministry. You know what you want to accomplish in local work. Number 17, be an efficient worker. We've already talked about how to do that. Work on our organization is number 18. It's not on the bullet points. I ran out of space.
What was it?
Work on organization. Anything you get your hands on time management, you may not learn but one or two tricks out of any given book or website. But anything you can do to learn how to be more efficient will help you. Have a reward system is the last thing. Reward yourself for productivity. Maybe it's to buy a book. Maybe you have a book fund and you put $5 or $10 in there every week that you have ways to gauge that. I mean, I don't think it's 100%. Maybe it's based on a certain point system that in this area of ministry, in that area, it's study, personal study or special studies, local work studies, and then people activities. And give yourself a point for that so much, and then reward yourself for being successful in that. I don't know. Do you know Jerry Barber? Is that a name you know? Okay, he's a preacher in the Mid-South. He does this with running. He gives himself $1 for every, 10 miles that he runs. That's how he buys a new suit every year. So he buys a suit. So you can come up with a reward system for a lot of areas of your work in life.
Some big reward you can give.
It'd be $10 for every mile, right? All right. What's an honest day's work? Well, let me suggest that among what you think, that we consider these. Number one, preachers must know their limitations. And they must communicate them to the leaders of the congregation. Preachers must know their limitations, and they must communicate them to the leaders of the congregation. Well, what does that mean? Where might you be limited? And how do you go about communicating that?
Classes, Bible classes, they want you to teach on Wednesday and Sunday and those sermons and do that for months on end.
Okay. Without rest or rotation?
Yeah.
I think it's fair.
In an area where you don't have elders, who do you communicate that to?
Well, after you've been in a men's business meeting for 6 months, you'll appreciate 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 more. But that's where that comes from. And it's diffused that way because you have different expectations. And they're communicated in a different forum, not in an elders meeting or in a communicate from them, but in that men's business meeting.
Okay.
Although you won't find yourself constantly in the crosshairs of that sort of thing, it might hardly ever come up. My first work was without elders, and I had very little dictated to me in there. Again, if you organize your time well and the productivity is seen, then you will develop a trust to where those kinds of matters don't come up. But I'm talking about being proactive. I had to tell them when I came here, I took master's here. I took counseling with Dr. Mike Price. Jerry Martin does it now. I have had some counseling instruction. I have a dad that's a good counselor. I've got a good library, counseling resources. Gary Collins' book on counseling is a great textbook. But I have no technical, trained abilities. And guys, somebody comes in and they're bipolar, I can't help with that. If somebody comes in and they are schizophrenic, if somebody comes in and they have got some kind of sexual deviation these kind of things crop up. Somebody comes in and they have an uncontrollable urge, or at least it's been diagnosed that way, of saying something dirty to complete strangers of women. They come in, you can show them what the Bible says about sexual purity and about what the Bible says about that, but there are situations where people need meds, and I can't help with that. Or if it's a complex behavioral issue, dealt with a situation where you had a couple of young people who had an over-integrated relationship, and it crossed the line and became sexual in nature, homosexual nature. I could certainly listen. I could talk to them about what the Scripture says about natural affection in Romans chapter 1. But at some point, what we did is we referred them to a local agency. We live here in this area, focus on families right down the street, and on that matter, they're straight up and down. And so we can know my limitations, and I'd say to leadership, guys, there comes a point where I have to refer because I don't know that. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and we get ourselves in some trouble. Or sometimes we're too proud to say, I can't do this. Or we're afraid it may impact our job. We've got better to do that than not. Number 2, you need to take responsibility for caring for yourself. Financially, that's on you. Physically, in every regard of your life, nobody's going to do that for you. Number 3, prayer and study should be a vital part of every day. And when things get bad, pray more. Number 4, akin to that, prayerfully plan what needs to be done. Number 5, you notice I said, make sure that you live a little each day. You know, even as you guys are embroiled, and I know, and I appreciate how difficult your schedule is, you're still getting to go to school in Denver, Colorado. I hope you take a few moments We have some beautiful sunrises and sunsets here. Got those mountains facing west. You can get somewhere and see that, an angle of that. Got all these open space parks around here. But, I've lived in some places not as pretty as here, and God's creation is so magnificent, so diverse. Take a little time. I'll tell you what, I don't know if any of you guys are coffee drinkers or not, but to go out on the front porch, especially in late spring, a cup of coffee, and just kind of see the stars and to enjoy that, and to talk to God and just make sure that you don't allow the ups and downs of life to keep you from that personal enjoyment. Because happiness is not dictated by where you are and what you do. It has to come from within. Number 6, remember that as head of the family, you are never off duty there. You're always the head. You're always responsible. Or as Steve Pollard put it, to be the point man, to get your family safely across. All right, now, if you look at the other few sheets here, this comes, any of you guys know who Jeff Jenkins is? This comes by virtue of some material that he recommended. And this is a good way for you to assess yourself. If you look at that first sheet, your time management rating, notice it says below are 10 questions which will help you determine how well or how poorly you now manage your time. After each question, put a check mark over the column that best describes your answer, kind of a self-survey. The number at the top of each column is used for scoring. How well do you manage your time? And you see some of the questions. Do you take on more work than you can handle? Do you worry about work on weekends? This is some very practical stuff here. Do you have trouble remembering whether you've done something? I've been there. Are you unable to work because of interruptions? You may have to change your environment. Do you become uncertain about what to do next? It's been funny. I don't know that it happens with guys who graduate here, but I've talked to guys who graduate from certain places. And they say the moving van comes and they go and they put all their stuff in their office and it takes about a week to set all those books on the shelf and to get the desks and everything in place and then they come in there that next Monday and they sit down and they go, well, now what am I supposed to do? Now don't let that happen to you. We've talked about how to organize your day, but that's what is a time sucker here is you go, all right, I finished the bulletin article. Now what am I going to do for the next 3 hours? That should never, ever happen to you, but it can. You're not good with managing your time. Do you think about too much about small details? Like there should be another O on that word too. Sorry about that. Number 7, does time pass too slowly for you? Again, put another O there. I got an O shortage, I guess. Number 8, does time pass too quickly for you? Is your work area messy? Oh, man. Are your personal records disorganized? All right, so what you do is you add up your score to the numbers on top. You see that often it's 5, sometimes 3, 1. And so there's how you can assess what kind of time manager you are. I think there's some science to that. Now here's the next page. Here's some self-evaluation that will help you to move toward greater time management. List 5 things in your life you need to organize. You guys might, in all that free time you'll have on a weekend or something, sit down and think about that. Maybe when you get into local work, you've been in local work for a year, write down where you need to work on that. And then, notice, rank items in number 1, that is this first setup here, on a scale of 1 to 5 to how much it irritates you. What's bothering you the most about what's not organized? And then, here's a good other way to do this, how to organize the day, the week, even with people to pray for, things to pray for, people to write. Now, that's a good way to quantify how you spent your time. I think that's good. Books to read. You ever hear? I mean, I do that several times in this class. I'm sure other teachers do too. You know, here's this book. You know, and you may type it down, maybe not. Well, how are you going to get them read? You know, write them down somewhere and start going after them.
Wait for the movie. You just wait for the movie. Right?
Just wait for the movie. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. The fireproof guys will put it out if it's good enough. All right. Before we move to the library, let's see. I don't think this will take much time, but I don't want to risk it. Let me, if I can find it here, I'm not being a very good example. All right, here we go. The midterm study guide.
Exiles in Unit 2 under...
As actually, if you'll notice your syllabus, we've dealt with the first two sections under Unit 2 today.
First two sections under Unit 2.
And we may, and I'm covering all these things. I may not strictly cover them in order, but I'm going to at least introduce your personal library this morning, so that'll be a third thing. Take one and pass it. I realize you can read well, but as I read these out loud, it may prompt you to have any questions, or if you feel like there's clarification needed. These are the things that, if you're familiar with this, guys, here's your A right here. If you're familiar with this, you're going to do well on the test. You've never taken a test with me, so you don't know this, but I'm not a tricker. I'm not trying to make you stumble. There are true false questions on there, but if you've studied it, they won't mess you up, except maybe on bonus. But as far as what actually counts for you ready. Number 1, be thoroughly familiar with the content of your notes from class. The following will be helpful for nearly everything that you will find on the exam. I do reserve the right to select a few questions for matters covered in class not found below. All right, number 2 deals with the first part of your test. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to come in, I'm going to hand you part 1. That's open book. As soon as everybody has all that, we're all settled in, 30 minutes. You have to use all the 30 minutes, but you have 30 minutes. That's about right. It'll be about what it takes you. The test questions will come directly from quotes, lists, and main points in the book. All right, so that's any questions about open book. It is what it says. It's open. You will do that. Make sure you put your name on it. Turn it into me, and then I will hand you the second part. That, of course, is there on its closed book. Do you have a question, Scott?
I was just, how far?
Halfway.
Exactly halfway.
Mm-hmm.
So like all the way through Unit 3?
Yeah, let me see. I don't have it here. Do you may have to have the book with them? So here's what's going to, just to expect, you're not going to go, but yeah, you don't go past about halfway in the book. I don't know how far you guys have gotten, but it'll be, I'm sorry, I don't have a more accurate benchmark, but I don't think that's going to trip you up. You're not going to find anything in the last 7 or 8 chapters. It'll be about halfway. All right, on the closed book portion, starting with number 3. Under the general introduction, be prepared to list at least 3 reasons why I love preaching.
Personal reasons?
The reasons that were mentioned in class. They were alliterated. Yeah, that would be alliterated. Number 4, regarding the preacher's personal life, be familiar with who are the great preachers of the Bible that we mentioned in class, and be especially familiar with Jeremiah chapter 1. Be able to match qualities emphasized in the preacher who emphasized them. I hand out these expert preachers, like I handed you Frank Chester today. So they will mention that this quality is important. I don't want you to, you're not responsible for knowing what all they said, but they will emphasize the quality. Number 6, be able to match from great texts on preaching the outline of the text. For example, the preacher, a man with no vainglorious characteristics or motivations, a man with a burdened heart, a man with an exclusive message with the text. Do you remember that we went through, that was either the first or second class, and we had some great texts on preaching? Number 7, be able to list at least 3 of the 4 attributes of the preacher's personal spiritual life. And under one of them, my own personal prophet Bible study, be prepared to mention at least 3 important qualities of that study. You can come up with more than that. It'll be to your benefit. Number 8, from the preacher's life is preaching, at least 3 qualities I emphasized. Remember we talked about dress, do you wear, it depends on where you are. Friends, don't be exclusive. You're everybody's preacher, but you can't have friends. And in all of these, there's many, many more than that. Usually there's at least double the amount that I'm asking for. Number 9, 3 ingredients in the recipe for successful local work. At least one thing I have learned as a second-generation preacher. At least 2 things we learned about the preacher and preacher's wife team of Aquila and Priscilla. So, all right, for example there, what is that? There's service, hospitality. All right, so you go and you glean that from your notes, and then that's what you'll be responsible for. Be familiar with the role, the qualities, the relationship, and the suggestions for the preacher's wife. Number 13, cite at least 5 things I emphasize in the preacher's relationship to his wife. There's like 20-something there. Number 14, know at least one suggestion from the preacher's paternal life as a father. Be able to identify the 6 destructive B's.
Sure that's all? Wow.
Listen, let me tell you something.
Yeah, we got to the back. Flip it over.
Yeah, we're not done yet. Sorry. Scott, if it'll make you feel better, this is well, I can't remember. I guess the 3rd or 4th time I've taught this particular course. I don't think anybody's ever made less than an 80 on my midterm. So don't
I
sweat.
want to be the first one. So.
Don't sweat. Well, I love all the guys I've taught, but I'd say that there are quite a few that would be that you would mentally rank ahead of. So. Number 16, under discouragement, be able to identify at least 3 causes and 5 ways to fight it. That's that whole entire unit. Okay? Know the key words, burnout and beating burnout. Remember, 4 keys. And then we spent a good bit of time, probably half of an entire class period, identifying the emotional, behavioral, and spiritual symptoms that go along with burnout. Number 19, be able to cite at least 5 signs of stress. It can be from any or all of the following categories: physical, psychological, behavioral, or spiritual, and stress in the ministry. On time management, know at least 2 of Dr. Davis's time usurpers, the stuff we just went over. 3 reasons why you should have a daily schedule. And then 3 tips from the practical tips for making a daily schedule. And be advised that the test questions will come in the form of fill in the blank, true, false, and multiple choice questions. Fill in the blank may look like short answer on some occasions. All right, guys, if you're thoroughly familiar with this, you'll be aggravated if you make a 99 and not 100. There are 3 bonus questions, or at least 2. I'm trying to think. I just did some revision. So you can pick up some extra points, and that will come from in here, or perhaps one thing that we mentioned in class. So I realize that's ambitious, and that's going to push you, and I believe in give and take, and so since I'm taking that from you, I'm going to give you about 25 minutes today to go ahead and get started on that. We'll end class early. I can't finish what I want to start here. So any questions about the guide I just gave you, or what you think is going to be expected on the test? All right. Charles, why don't you lead us in a word of closing prayer?
Okay. Dear Lord, we're thankful for this day. We're thankful, O Lord, for all that you give us, for this opportunity to come, to be here at school. We thank you for this moisture, sending it our way. We're thankful, Father, for the instructors here. We pray that you will be with Neal and with his wife and his boys, that you will watch over them always and protect them. We're thankful, Father, for his time and effort to teach your word. Lord, be with each one of us, be with all of us as students, that we will take this instruction and learn. We're thankful, Lord, for the many blessings that you bestow upon us, for so much we take for granted. We do thank you for the time that we have. We're thankful for the time that we have with our families, and for our family, and for our food and our clothing. for the churches that support us. We are blessed indeed, Lord. You have given us so much. We pray that you watch over us through this day. We pray that we will always live for you each day of our life, that we might be an example to those round about us, and that we will take in due time, Lord, what we have learned to the world. Thank you, Father, for what you do for us. Thank you for Christ and for the church, the sacrifice that Jesus made on our behalf. Be with us through the rest of this day and through this evening and through this week, Lord, as we work and strive to live for you and to learn more about your word. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. It's kind of a program note before I turn you loose. Michael Sharp from the deacons here, most of you probably know him, not all. He's going to take the first portion of our class on the 12th. That'll be the Tuesday when we come back to talk about particularly taxes. You'll notice if you look at the syllabus that we skipped over the finances, I do deal with some things in the third section of the class, but Michael is going to help with regard to some of that when he comes in. So we'll step back into section 1 for the material that Michael presents. I've got a huge packet from Clint Stevens that I will give to you about taxes and accounting related matters. But we'll be moving on to the library in the section after chapel next week. All right? Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
For a little extra time to maybe